Hi, my name is Holly McDonald, and I am with Compass Realtor. This is the Costa Mesa Pod, where we talk about the lifestyle and things that make Costa Mesa such a great, unique city. Today, I am joined by Jeff Kirkpatrick of Coastal Inspections, and I've had the honor of knowing him for well over 10 years. As you may know, I'm a realtor, and so part of my intention with this podcast is to talk about what is unique about Costa Mesa. And so Jeff comes at it with a really unique perspective because a lot of times when we do home inspections here, there's a lot of things that come up that are unique to our area. And I think it's really useful for people to kind of have an idea what they might be running into when they encounter a home inspection. So, Jeff, can you introduce yourself and tell my audience a little bit more about you and your company?
Sure. Thanks, Holly. My name's Jeff Kirkpatrick, and my company name is Coastal Inspection Services. And like Holly said, I think we've actually done business together closer to 15 years. Long time. And I've been in the home inspection industry this is my 23rd year. I started out as a single operator, and probably 6 or 7 years ago hired a second guy. We now have 5 inspectors. We do a lot of inspections in Costa Mesa, and we also inspect houses throughout all of Southern California, from the border in San Diego all the way up to Santa Barbara and inland to Palm Springs. So we cover a pretty wide area, and as of recently, I think we did our just over 20,000 home inspections. So we're doing well.
So Jeff has seen a lot of houses. He's seen a lot all over, but he's also done a lot in Costa Mesa and has great familiarity with the area. So I wanted to talk a little bit about different things that come up that might be like unknown to buyers. I mean, when we have buyers come in and do a home inspection, it's really for them to just kind of have a better sense of the home and what sort of items they may need to upkeep. One thing that I know I come across a lot is Costa Mesa homes are known for having cracks. Not necessarily detrimental cracks, but cracking is common. You'll see it in walls, ceilings, garage pads, patios, that type of thing. The term we use is expansive soil, but Jeff, can you talk more about, what you kind of have to tell people at inspections so that they're not super concerned, or when they should be really concerned?
Sure. So a good portion of Costa Mesa has, like Holly said, highly expansive soil. And highly expansive soil is essentially clay. And what happens with expansive soil is when it rains or gets wet, the ground soaks up that water and expands. And as it dries out, it contracts. And each time it expands and contracts, the ground moves. And when the ground moves, it causes the foundation to move. And when the foundation moves, it causes walls and ceilings to move. Now, obviously, Costa Mesa is a pretty flat place. So most of you're not going to fall off a cliff. You're not going to move, and the cliff's not going to slide away. And the key to expansive soil is managing the water on the exterior of the house. You could call 1,000 engineers out, and they're all going to tell you if you manage the water on the exterior of the house, you can cut down on the cracking. So when we have expansive soil, in older houses, they tended not to put drainage systems in the ground. They tended not to put rain gutters up. So when we go to houses that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where drainage systems and gutters weren't common, we recommend they put in drainage systems to keep the water away from the house, and gutters to direct the water off the roof into the drainage system and get it out to the street. If you can keep that soil there's 2 ways to look at it. You can keep that soil damp all the time, so it always stays expanded and doesn't move. So if you're going to sprinkler regularly and keep the ground moist. Or you can keep the ground dry, and then obviously it's not going to move because it's not expanding from, soaking up the water. So a lot of the houses in Costa Mesa that were built in the 50s and 60s didn't have a lot of rebar and reinforcement in the foundation systems. So sometimes people get scared when they go in the house and they're walking through the house and they feel a big crack under the carpet or they see a crack in the wall. All of that stuff can be fixed, but you don't want to fix it and then have it happen again. So it's important again to go back and manage the water on the outside so that whatever you do to improve the inside of the house doesn't get cracked or wrecked by the expansive soil again.
Got it. Yeah, I know the majority of homes here seem to be on slab, but there are certain neighborhoods that are on the raised foundations. Um, do you have any tips or information about that would be more concerning for buyers or less concerning?
It's kind of the same thing. You're not going to get as much. Obviously, you're not going to get cracking in the middle of the floor. But if you're on a raised foundation, you'll feel a hump in the floor because there are posts and piers throughout the foundation system, and those have much smaller footings than the perimeter footings, so they tend to move up and down a little more. So again, I'll tell you the one thing we do find with the raised foundations is it may have gotten wet early on when the house was built, like, back in the 50s or early 60s. And at that time, the piers and the foundation moved, and then it gets dry, and it hasn't moved since. But obviously, once things move, unless you correct it, they don't go back. Because a lot of times when we go underneath those houses with raised foundation systems, the dirt and everything underneath there is so dry and fine, it's like talcum powder at this point. But you can tell when you're on expansive soil because the ground will look like alligator skin. It's all cracked and has like big, like you think of a dry lake bed. It looks like that, where you see like little chunks and cracks in the ground, and sometimes that's what it looks like when you get underneath a house with a raised foundation system.
Ah, yeah. I feel like that's how the Santa Ana River bed looks a lot of the year, and I know there's a lot of expansive soil over there. Um, so when you think about coming to Costa Mesa for a home inspection, what are some of like the triggers or like main things that you're thinking as an inspector? Okay, we're going to see this, we're going to see that there.
So the first thing we're probably going to see is the stuff we just talked about, the expansive soil stuff. And, so you're seeing some cracking in the exterior walls, maybe on the inside. The second thing, and this kind of goes along with that, is you're probably going to have, and again, things will vary based upon the era when the house was built. A lot of the housing stock in Costa Mesa was built in the 50s and 60s, early 70s. We're now starting to see where newer neighborhoods where they're doing these infill developments, so you'll see new houses in different places, and some of the things you'll see in the newer housing developments are different than the older ones because we've learned a lot over time. So now they build the drainage systems in, they put the rain gutters in, the materials they use are different, so they react differently with the environment. But the second thing after expansive soils that I'm thinking is we've got a house that's maybe built in the 50s, 60s, or 70s with the underground sewer piping, and there may be some issues with the underground sewer piping. So, and this is a fairly recent thing, at least as it relates to the home inspection industry. We also do sewer inspections. So we take a video camera, we find a clean out. If you don't have a clean out, we try and go through the roof and get into the sewer piping underground and run the camera all the way out to the street where the city connection is, usually in the middle of the street. And along with the expansive soil conditions, and then you add in old trees. In Costa Mesa, they kind of line the streets with big trees, and you get roots in the sewer piping. And depending on the severity and what's going on, it may just be a matter of hydrojetting and removing the roots, or sometimes because of the expansive soil, there's actually cracked piping that needs to be replaced or repaired. So that's probably the second thing that I'm thinking, when I get to a house. Then The next thing is probably the roof. We have a tendency in this is probably true throughout all of Southern California. We live in a beautiful place. The weather's awesome most of the time. It rarely rains, and so people don't think about their roof. Most of the time, people wait till it's raining to realize they have a bad roof and it's actually leaking, and then they call the roofer, and the roofer tells them it's a month to get out there. So we get away with a lot of roofing issues that would be problems in other parts of the country because of our weather. So the third thing I look at is the roof, because we want to take care of those roofing issues, or at least get them addressed before it starts to rain, so that if you fix up your house, it doesn't wreck the inside of the house again.
Yeah, I think too, like, just to interject there, that for people coming from other areas, they may think that a roof needs to be like completely replaced at a certain time, because they're relating it to other areas where, you do get more harsh weather conditions. And here, I mean, obviously the age of the roof is important to know, and, it needs maintenance, but doesn't necessarily mean just because a roof is, 20 years old or whatnot, that it's expired beyond
Correct.
its life.
So that's really a good point. A lot of roofing materials tend to last a lot longer around here because of our weather. We also don't have some of the restrictions that they have in other states or other parts of the country that insurance companies put on homeowners. I know in many areas, if you have a 15 or 20-year-old roof, you just can't get insurance on the roof, and they don't, on the house, and they don't care that it has 10 years left. They tell you that's a 15-year-old roof, we're not going to insure it. If you want insurance, you have to put a new roof in. That's not the case around here. And in most cases, and for a majority of the roofing types, you're going to get at least 30 years out of a roof around here. Sometimes you can even extend it a little longer by doing a little tune-up or some patches. We have a lot of tile roofs as well. If you maintain the roof and don't have any broken tiles, that roof may last 50 years. And there's some new composite materials that last long too. So a little bit of maintenance will go a long way, because we're not getting the weather beating that we get as they do in other parts of the country.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into the lifestyle again too, because especially for parts of coastal Orange County, such as Costa Mesa, I mean, we do get different weather patterns and whatnot, like things that you need to kind of watch out for in the homes. So we just talked a little bit about the roof, but like from your perspective, what sort of things do you encounter that are kind of weather related here?
So kind of because we're near the ocean, we get a lot of like wet dry cycles, and because we reach dew point at night. So people think, like, now dry rot and termites are the responsibility of the termite guy, but we run into it during home inspections because we see the bad wood, so we try to point those things out. But like dry rot, it doesn't necessarily have to rain to get the wood wet in order for dry rot to occur. When you live close to the ocean, every night it gets relatively cool, and we go below dew point, and the tops and all the exposed wood gets damp. Well, those repeated cycles of dampness, and then obviously it dries out during the day because it's warm and dry during the day. Those repeated damp dry cycles cause the dry rot to happen. So if you keep things painted, if the paint is bad and cracking, then moisture gets in the little paint cracks, and that helps the dry rot spread. So if you keep things, painted and maintained, the wood will last a lot longer, and you won't have as many termite or, dry rot issues.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to point out here is just that I know that first-time buyers often, or people from other areas, get really kind of freaked out by termites. And, if they have a termite inspection specifically done, or the home inspector points out, there's probably termites here, they get really freaked out, and they're like, oh my gosh. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's almost every house here. You're going to have some termite damage,
Yeah,
and so it's not necessarily the end of the world, and it's totally normal.
I can tell when a buyer or client is from out of state, maybe the Midwest or the East, because the first two questions they ask are about termites and earthquakes. And in Southern California, it's a Mediterranean climate, so we live in the perfect environment for termites. They're everywhere. It really takes a long time for them to do serious damage to a house, and you know, obviously when you buy a house, you get a termite inspection. Everybody does. It used to be required by the banks, but it's not anymore, but people still get them. And if you have a termite guy come out every couple of years, and most of them will do it for free if you're not involved in a real estate transaction, have them come out and do an inspection, you'll be fine. It takes years and years and years for a significant amount of termite damage to occur. And this is just my personal opinion. I would get a termite inspection every couple of years versus signing up for a service. I tend to find that those services where they come out quarterly, they tend to miss some things that the guys who do the inspections for real estate transactions find. So I think you're better off just having a termite inspector come out every couple of years versus signing up for a service.
Yeah, I know people ask about that a lot. Um, so I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about how Costa Mesa has a lot of homes from like the 40s, 50s, 60s. We also have a lot of the infill development, so we do have a good amount of new construction. What do you see as being some of the different challenges between an older home that you might have to explain to somebody versus a newer home? I know some people are just, they only want the new stuff, but we've also had a lot of the older homes completely gutted and totally remodeled. So what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on
so
that?
that's the thing. And personally, I like the older homes from the 50s, 60s because, they were built in a way where they weren't crammed on a lot, where you're 3 feet from the neighbors next door and 10 feet from the neighbors behind you. There's a little more flexibility because, like you mentioned, people like to remodel and make the house their own. So one of the ways you can do that is by, remodeling and updating things. And in a lot of the newer houses, it's just not possible to do that. They design houses now with computers and everything, and when they make the floor plan, they've maximized the space on the lot that's available. Where in the older houses from the 50s, 60s, 70s, they built the house and you had a lot more flexibility to move walls or change things around, even like move entire rooms, move the kitchen to the front of the house or the back of the house because you wanted to make a big family room. So we see a lot of that now in the houses in Costa Mesa where people are remodeling because you can get a really nice house on a really nice lot in a really nice area if you're willing to remodel some things.
Yeah, there's a lot of like customized homes, and like you were mentioning too, just the ability to have a larger lot and be able to do the expansion of the footprint or take out the walls and completely update the floor plan to what a lot of people want right now. You can really max it out. So
Yeah. And
um,
when people remodel, a lot in terms of what we find during a home inspection, a lot of the things, are obviously if they're getting permits and stuff, it's brought up to the current code. One of the things that's happened over time, just as a function of society in general, is we use a lot more electricity than we used to. Everything we have runs off electricity, computers, cell phones, even your car you have to plug into electricity now. So because of that, we need bigger electric panels. Well, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the electric panel was 100 amps that they put in every single house. Well, now the standard is kind of 200 amps. So when people, remodel, they put in new electric panels. Some of our wiring practices have changed. In the older houses, there's an old two-wire system without a ground, so now they rewire. And so really, I like a lot of the, like I said earlier, I prefer those. I like the older house that people have remodeled because it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get new stuff in a house with a bigger footprint, and I don't know, I just think it's better. But some people like new houses.
Yeah. And I guess just to kind of wrap things up with regards to our city, Costa Mesa, and kind of the lifestyle and what you encounter as a home inspector, what kind of comes to mind for you when you think about our area? I know we talked a little bit about this throughout, but anything else you want to throw in?
No, I think from a home inspection perspective, a lot of things come down to just maintenance. You know, a lot of times you run into houses where there's just deferred maintenance because we get away with a lot of stuff because the weather's really good here. Where if you live somewhere where the weather wasn't good and you know it was snowing or hot or cold, it had to be insulated a lot better. The roof had to be weather tight because it rains every other day, and we have a lot of good weather. So people tend to forget about maintenance sometimes. So you know a lot of the items you'll see on a home inspection report are deferred maintenance items that really don't take a lot to fix up. I mean, occasionally you're going to run into something big. That's not normal. Most of the time, it's deferred maintenance stuff that with a little effort and a few dollars, you can fix up and make a great house.
I know, I love when we're at home inspections, and obviously there usually is a laundry list of things that come up, but you'll be like, that's a minor fix. That's, you know, the part. It sounds more scary, I guess, than it is if you're not familiar with home updating and home improvements. So you see a report and you see all these items called out as a buyer, we might be really concerned that everything's just going to be so tremendously expensive or that the house is just, you know, a wreck. But in reality, these are just tune-up items a lot of the time.
We really try to explain that to people. I mean, there's a lot of inspection companies out there that everything's a safety hazard that's, you know, going to kill you tomorrow. It's really not the truth. Most of the time, things can be fixed with, you know, a little bit of effort and a few dollars, and they're not the biggest safety hazards in the world. I mean, technically, if it's in the code, it's a safety hazard, but that doesn't mean that there are millions of people being harmed by these things all the time. But they're probably things that just need to be taken care of.
I was just going to ask you too. Do you get asked to do inspections at a lot of the accessory dwelling units? Because that's also a pretty big thing, especially in East Side, Costa Mesa, where a lot of homes have added those or like done conversions and that type of thing.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of ADUs because the state is actually pushing it and making it very easy for people to add ADUs, and people see it as a good source of additional income, you know, for their property. Yeah, and I've noticed in the last year and a half, 2 years, which is when the state really started pushing the whole ADU thing a lot more because we're in such a housing crisis, that the quality and the standards and the workmanship that's going into these are much better because people are realizing that if they do it the way they're supposed to do it, they can actually benefit from it versus going, oh, I'll just drywall the garage and somebody can live in my garage and we'll call it living space. You know, you don't see that so much anymore because it's very easy to put an ADU in. Most jurisdictions have to allow you to do it. You know, the states put in some laws that they can't put all these goofy restrictions in like they used to prevent people from doing it. So the quality of the work and the things we're seeing are comparable to what you see in the rest of the house because it's just easier to do now. It's easier to get the approvals for everything.
Yeah, I know. I've toured some homes with some amazing ADUs. I mean, they're like on par with like the luxury apartment
Right.
communities.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're given the choice and you want like more privacy or whatnot, it's really cool. So, well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. Your whole team, I've worked with a lot of them now. Everybody's awesome. Like everybody has a really good, just like manner of speaking with people and giving them the information in a way that's not, very daunting, very, very thorough. And you do have the experience like in so many areas, but I do love how like specifically for me, like where I do a lot of sales in Costa Mesa, you are very in tune to the areas, and you're like that anywhere, any other city I go to. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you referring the business to us, and I hope you have a very successful remainder of the year.
All right. Well, thank you. You have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.